He had not always lived like this. There was a time when people stood up, when he entered a room, when his words carried weight, when his home was full of light, laughter, and movement. Back then, his life felt solid, like a strong house built on firm ground. He worked hard, trusted the wrong people, believed loyalty was returned in the same measure it was given. The fall did not happen in one day. It came slowly, quietly. It's like cracks spreading through a wall that no one notices until the whole place collapses. First came the business trouble. A deal he had worked on for years failed because of forged papers and partners who disappeared overnight. He tried to fight it, tried to prove the truth, but money ran out faster than hope. Lawyers stopped answering calls. Friends stopped inviting him to gatherings. Messages went unread. Then came the house. The large home he once took pride in was sold piece by piece. Furniture left first, then the car, then the last valuable items that reminded him of better days. What remained was a small, aging house far from the center of town. The walls were thin, the roof leaked during rain, and the silence inside felt heavier than any noise. People whispered about him. Some said he deserved it. Others pretended they had never known him. He walked past familiar faces in the market and saw eyes quickly turn away. Shame followed him everywhere, pressing against his chest like a stone. Each morning he woke up later than the day before. There was no reason to rise early anymore. No office to go to. No phone calls waiting. Just empty hours and thoughts that refused to stay quiet. He skipped meals to save money, telling himself he was not hungry. His clothes became loose on his body, and his face looked older than his years. Loneliness changed him. He stopped shaving regularly. He stopped caring if the lights stayed on all night. He talked less, even to himself. Some days he sat by the window for hours watching strangers walk past, wondering how life moved on so icily without him. Memories haunted him at night. The sound of laughter from past gatherings, the confidence he once carried without effort, the belief that he was untouchable. Those thoughts hurt more than hunger. One evening, as rain poured through a broken corner of the roof, he realized the house had become unlivable. The floor was damp, dishes piled up untouched, and the air smelled stale. He had tried to manage alone, but his strength, both physical and emotional, was gone. It was not pride that stopped him from asking for help. It was fear. Fear of being rejected again. Fear of hearing words that would confirm what he already believed, that he was finished. Still, survival has a way of pushing people past fear. Through a neighbor, he heard about a woman who cleaned houses for a living. She was known for being quiet, reliable, and willing to work for little pay. He hesitated for days before reaching out. What could he offer her? He could barely afford basic food. When she finally arrived, he did not expect much. He did not even greet her properly. He simply opened the door and stepped aside. She did not react to the mess. She did not wrinkle her nose or look around with judgment. She nodded once and began working without asking questions. She wiped dust from shelves, opened windows, and moved through the house with calm focus. He watched from a chair, unsure why her presence unsettled him. Maybe it was because she treated the place like a home, not a ruin. Or maybe because she treated him like a person, not a failure. She spoke only when needed. Simple words. Polite tone. No pity in her eyes. No curiosity about his past. That silence felt respectful and strangely comforting. At the end of the day, he struggled to hand her the small amount of money he had promised. His hands shook slightly as he did. She accepted it without counting, thanked him, and asked if she should return the next day. He wanted to say no. He wanted to save what little money remained. But the thought of the house falling back into darkness, of silence returning, scared him more than poverty, so he nodded. Days turned into weeks. She came regularly, sometimes bringing simple food she cooked herself. When he apologized for not paying on time, she brushed it away with a small smile and said it was fine. He knew it was not fine, but she never made him feel small for it. Slowly, without realizing it, he began to change small habits. He woke up earlier because she arrived early. He washed his face before sitting in the living room. Sometimes he even joined her at the table for a meal. He still felt broken. The weight of failure did not disappear, but something new existed in the space around him: quiet care, steady presence, and a reminder that not everyone leaves when things fall apart. He did not know it yet, but this was the beginning. Not of wealth, not of success, but of being seen again as human, and for the first time in a long while. The darkness did not feel endless. The days passed slowly, and the young man could feel the weight of his struggles pressing down on him. Life had become a series of endless challenges, and no matter how hard he tried to climb out of the darkness, the past seemed to pull him back. He had little left, not much money, not many friends, and the few people who remained in his life only reminded him of what he had lost. Yet amid all this gloom, there was one person who never left his side: his maid. She had been with him through the worst of times, and her presence, though quiet, felt like a small beacon of hope in a world that had become cold and unkind. From the very first day she had entered his life, she had treated him with respect, not as a broken man, but as someone who still mattered. She understood his pain without him ever having to explain it. She noticed the small things: the way he would stare blankly at the ceiling for hours, the way he hesitated to speak to anyone, the subtle tremble in his hands when he tried to eat or sleep. She would quietly make tea just the way he liked it, leave small notes with encouraging words, and sometimes when she thought he needed it most, she would simply sit silently beside him, letting him feel that someone cared. At first, he barely noticed her. His mind was too crowded with memories of betrayal and loss. But gradually her quiet kindness began to seep through the walls he had built around himself. He noticed the way she would stay late, tidying up the house after he had long gone to bed. He noticed the way she would remember small details about his life, little things he had forgotten he even mentioned. She never judged him, never complained, and never tried to take advantage of his vulnerability. In a world full of people who had turned their backs on him, she had become his anchor. One evening, as he sat alone in the dim light of his small apartment, staring at the peeling wallpaper and the empty shelves, she brought him a plate of food. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it smelled comforting, like someone had taken care to make it just for him. He looked up at her and noticed the faint smile on her face, a smile that seemed to say, "I'm here. You are not alone." For the first time in many months, he felt a flicker of warmth in his chest. He realized that her presence had become more than just helpful. It had become essential. He began to open up, little by little. One night after she had set the table and poured 2 cups of tea, he spoke. His voice was hesitant at first, rough from disuse, but it carried a weight of honesty he hadn't felt in a long time. He spoke of his failures, his regrets, the mistakes that had cost him everything. She listened patiently, never interrupting, never offering platitudes. When he was done, she simply took his hand in hers and squeezed it gently. That small gesture spoke louder than any words could. In that moment, he realized that he had been starving not for food, but for understanding, for someone who could see the real him beneath the scars. Days turned into weeks, and he began to notice a change in himself. The world still seemed harsh, but he felt a new kind of strength growing inside him. A quiet resilience fueled by the care of the maid who had refused to give up on him. She encouraged him to step outside, to take small walks, to breathe in the air he had long avoided. She celebrated every little victory with him, finishing a book, fixing a broken appliance, even just smiling genuinely after a long day. Slowly, life began to feel less like a prison and more like a place where he could, perhaps, find peace. One afternoon, while he was struggling to fix an old chair that had broken under the weight of neglect, she came in with a toolkit and a determined look on her face. Without saying much, she helped him lift the chair, tighten the screws, and carefully align the pieces. They worked together in silence, but in that silence, there was an unspoken bond forming. He realized that it wasn't just about fixing the chair, it was about rebuilding something inside himself, something that had been shattered long ago. Her presence was like a steady hand guiding him back to life, as he grew more comfortable with her presence. He began to let her into his world in ways he had never allowed anyone before. He shared memories, both bitter and sweet. Stories of the family that had abandoned him, the friends who had turned away, and the dreams that had been crushed under the weight of reality. She listened without judgment, often offering a soft word of encouragement or a gentle reminder that the past did not have to define him. Her loyalty and patience were like a balm to his wounded soul. The turning point came one evening when he received news that could have crushed him entirely. A business deal he had pinned his last hopes on had fallen through. The disappointment was so profound that he felt the old despair creeping back in, threatening to drag him under. But this time, he did not face it alone. She sat beside him, holding his hand, letting him cry, letting him vent, letting him be human. She reminded him that one failure did not erase all the progress he had made, that he was not defined by a single setback. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth and care. Over the following months, their bond deepened. He began to trust her in ways he had never trusted anyone. He shared his fears, his hopes, his small victories, and even his fleeting moments of joy. She became not just a helper, but a companion, a friend, and eventually, the person he could lean on when the world felt too heavy. Her loyalty never wavered, and he realized that for the first time in his life, he had someone who believed in him unconditionally. Through her encouragement, he started to explore opportunities he had once thought impossible. Small steps at first, applying for part-time jobs, reconnecting with distant relatives, learning new skills. Each step was a challenge, but with her by his side, it felt achievable. She celebrated each success with genuine joy, making him feel proud of accomplishments he had long dismissed as unimportant. With every small victory, he began to see that life, though difficult, could be beautiful again. He also began to notice changes within himself that he hadn't expected. The anger that had simmered beneath the surface for so long began to soften. The bitterness that had colored his every thought slowly faded. He started to smile more, to laugh at small things, and to feel gratitude for even the simplest moments. And through it all, she remained by his side, quietly guiding, supporting, and loving him in ways that were patient, gentle, and unwavering. One evening, as they sat together on the worn-out couch, watching the city lights flicker outside the window, he realized something profound. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of belonging, a sense that life had meaning again. He understood that it was not the wealth, the status, or the successes that mattered most. It was the people who stayed, the hearts that refused to abandon him when the world had. And in that moment, he knew that his loyal Maid had become the anchor of his life. The reason he could see hope where before there had been none. From that day on, he began to rebuild his life, not with haste, not with desperation, but with steady determination. He faced challenges knowing he was not alone, celebrated victories knowing she would share in them, and confronted failures knowing she would help him rise again. Her presence had transformed him from a broken, lost man into someone capable of love, gratitude, and hope. He realized that her loyalty was not just a gift, it was a mirror, reflecting back the strength, courage, and goodness that had always existed within him, but had been buried under years of pain and neglect. And so, the journey continued, with each day bringing new lessons, new challenges, and new moments of connection. The world was still imperfect, still harsh at times, but he no longer faced it alone. With her by his side, he discovered that even the deepest wounds could heal, even the heaviest burdens could be shared, and even the loneliest heart could learn to love again. Life had begun to feel lighter, though it was far from easy. The young man could feel change within himself, small but persistent, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. He had learned to rely on himself again, but more importantly, he had learned that it was okay to rely on someone else. The maid's loyalty had opened a door he had long thought closed forever. With her support, he started dreaming again, not the reckless dreams of youth, but careful, tangible hopes that could slowly build a new life. It started with little things. He began going out more often, walking down streets he had avoided for years. The city, which had once felt like a labyrinth of disappointment, began to feel alive again. He noticed the laughter of children in parks, the soft chatter of neighbors in small cafes. and even the occasional street musician whose tunes made him smile. She would walk beside him sometimes, and even her quiet presence felt like a shield against the fear that had haunted him for so long. He realized that the world could still hold beauty, and perhaps even kindness, if he chose to see it. One day, while he was sorting through old papers and documents he had ignored for months, he found a stack of letters he had written to himself during his lowest moments. Reading them was painful. Every word was soaked in despair, every page a reminder of the life he had lost. But she sat beside him, gently encouraging him to keep going. Her hand on his shoulder, her steady voice, made him feel safe enough to confront those memories without breaking down completely. In that moment, he understood that facing the past was not about punishment, but about learning to move forward. Her support went beyond emotional comfort. She encouraged him to take small steps toward financial stability, offering practical advice and helping him organize his life in ways he had never managed before. Together, they created a schedule, set goals, and even worked on basic budgeting. Though it was frustrating at times, the young man found that having someone who cared enough to push him toward responsibility made the journey less lonely. She never scolded him. She guided him gently, celebrating each step forward, no matter how small. Through her encouragement, he found a part-time job that suited his skills, something he had long believed was beyond him. The first days were terrifying, the fear of failure, the shame of starting so low again, but she reminded him of his abilities. When he returned home exhausted and doubting himself, she would be waiting with a warm meal, a kind word, or sometimes just a silent presence that made him feel understood. Slowly, he began to regain confidence, realizing that failure did not define him, and that his value was not tied to money or status. As weeks turned into months, he began to notice other people noticing him again. The neighbors, once indifferent, now smiled when he passed by. Small business owners who had once ignored him now treated him politely. It was a subtle change, but it reminded him that he was no longer invisible. And all the while, the maid remained a constant, quietly supporting him without seeking recognition. Her presence had become more than just comfort. It was a reminder that loyalty, kindness, and patience could restore what life had tried to take away. Despite these small victories, there were still moments of doubt. There were days when the memories of betrayal and failure would return like shadows, threatening to undo everything he had rebuilt. On such days, he would sit alone, staring blankly at the floor, feeling the weight of his past pressing down on him. But even then, she would not leave. She would sit beside him, gently holding his hand, reminding him that darkness could not last forever and that he had survived far worse. Her faith in him became a lifeline, something that kept him tethered to hope even when he wanted to give up. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, he returned home feeling defeated. The weight of exhaustion and self-doubt made it hard to even step inside. But she was there, waiting with a quiet smile and a warm cup of tea. She didn't ask what had gone wrong or why he felt so low. She simply handed him the tea and sat beside him in silence. Slowly, he began to talk, not just about the day's troubles, but about the fears he had buried for years. And she listened, patiently, without judgment, without interruption. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly heard. Their bond grew stronger in these moments. He began to realize that her loyalty was not just about helping him survive, it was about teaching him to live again. She challenged him gently, encouraged him to take risks, and celebrated his progress as if it were her own. Her unwavering support showed him that he was worthy of love, respect, and care, lessons he had never truly learned in his past. He started to see her not just as a caretaker, but as a guide, a friend, and eventually, someone who mattered deeply in his heart. With her support, he also began to reconnect with the world outside his small apartment. He visited old acquaintances cautiously, mended fractured relationships, and even reached out to distant family members he had lost touch with. It was not always smooth. There were rejections and misunderstandings along the way, but he faced each setback with a new sense of resilience, knowing she would be there to support him. Her loyalty made him feel that no matter how many times life knocked him down, he could rise again. He started to take care of himself in ways he had neglected for years. Simple routines like washing his clothes, preparing meals, or keeping his living space clean became manageable with her guidance. She never forced him. She simply led by example, showing him that small acts of care could make a big difference in life. Over time, these routines became habits, and habits became a foundation for rebuilding his life. One afternoon, she suggested he try something he had long avoided, reconnecting with a passion he had once loved. He hesitated at first, fearing failure, but she insisted gently, reminding him of his talent and potential. Slowly, he began to explore it again, dedicating small hours each day to rediscovering the joy he had once felt. Each moment of success, each small spark of creativity, brought him closer to a sense of fulfillment he had thought lost forever. Through these experiences, he also learned to trust himself again. He realized that the world had not been entirely cruel, but that he had allowed fear and pain to dominate his perception. Her guidance helped him see that mistakes were part of growth, that setbacks were temporary, and that loyalty and kindness could exist even in a harsh world. She had not only helped him survive, she had helped him rediscover who he was, and more importantly, who he could become. One significant day came when he received an opportunity he had never imagined possible. A chance to work on a project that could change his life presented itself. He felt excitement and fear in equal measure, unsure if he was ready. But she stood by him, encouraging him to take the leap, reminding him of all the progress he had made. With her support, he accepted the challenge, knowing that no matter the outcome, he would not face it alone. In the following months, he poured himself into this new opportunity. The work was demanding, but each task completed strengthened his confidence. She celebrated every achievement, no matter how minor, and comforted him during moments of doubt. Their teamwork extended beyond chores or survival. It had become a partnership, built on trust, respect, and mutual care. Through her loyalty, he realized that life was not about enduring hardships alone, but about sharing the journey with someone who truly cared. Through all these trials and triumphs, he began to see a future he had never dared to imagine. A future not defined by past failures, loneliness, or fear, but by growth, hope, and meaningful connections. Her loyalty had transformed him not overnight but steadily, showing him that the most profound changes often come through patience, persistence, and quiet support. And so, as the seasons changed outside their small apartment, he felt a shift within himself. He was no longer the broken, defeated man who had once hidden from the world. He had begun to heal, not just externally, but deeply within. The loyalty of one person, a maid who refused to give up, had rekindled a sense of purpose, belonging, and even love in a heart that had long forgotten these feelings. With her by his side, he had learned that life could be challenging, yet beautiful, painful, yet rewarding, and that even in the darkest moments, there could be light. The journey was far from over. There were still obstacles, uncertainties, and moments of doubt. But he faced them differently now, armed with resilience, courage, and the unwavering support of someone who had proven that loyalty could restore not just life, but the very essence of a person. And through this journey, he began to understand that love and loyalty, when genuine, have the power to heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend, to lift spirits weighed down by despair, and to turn broken lives into stories of hope and renewal. Time moved forward, and life continued to test him in ways he had never imagined. Despite all the progress he had made, there were moments when old fears crept back into his mind. He had learned to trust the maid, to lean on her when the world seemed too heavy. Yet there were still times when the memories of betrayal and abandonment gnawed at him. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar pang of loneliness and doubt. But even then, her quiet presence was a balm. She would leave a small cup of tea by his bedside, a note with simple encouragement, or sometimes just sit quietly, letting him feel that he was not alone. One particular evening, he had faced a setback that shook him more than most. A business deal he had worked months to secure fell through at the very last moment. He felt the sting of disappointment deeply, the frustration of seeing all his efforts collapse, the fear that he had once again failed. He returned home, shoulders heavy, heart weighed down, and for the first time in weeks, he considered giving up. But she was there waiting with her steady calm. She did not scold him, nor did she try to minimize his pain. Instead, she simply held his hand and listened as he poured out every thought and fear. Her loyalty was not loud or dramatic, but it was unwavering, and in that moment, he realized that her presence alone gave him the courage to face the storm. After that night, he began to understand something vital. Life would always have obstacles, but the way he faced them could change everything. He realized that his growth was not just about achieving success, but about learning to navigate failure with resilience. And for that, he owed much to the maid who had stood by him without judgment, without impatience, and without expecting anything in return. Her support had taught him that true strength came from vulnerability, from allowing oneself to rely on another, and from trusting that someone genuinely cared. With her encouragement, he began to push himself further. He took risks he had long avoided, reached out to people he had once feared, and faced challenges that had previously seemed insurmountable. Each step was small, but cumulative, building a foundation of confidence he had never known. She celebrated each victory with him, whether it was successfully completing a task at work, mending a strained relationship, or simply maintaining his routines. Her loyalty had become a mirror, reflecting the best parts of himself that he had long forgotten. In the midst of rebuilding his life, he also began to notice how her loyalty went beyond mere support. She had a way of seeing him, truly seeing him in ways that no one else ever had. She noticed when he was anxious, when he was proud, when he was afraid, and when he was hopeful. She noticed the small, often overlooked moments that made him human. And in noticing these things, she gave him the space to be himself, without masks or pretenses. For the first time, he felt understood in a way that went deeper than words could express. One afternoon, while they were working together on organizing the small apartment they shared, he realized just how much had changed. The space that had once felt suffocating now felt alive. There were signs of care and attention everywhere. Neatly arranged books, small plants she had placed on the windowsill, a clean kitchen counter with tools and utensils in order. These small acts, seemingly insignificant, reflected her devotion, patience, and love for him. They were reminders that life could be structured, safe, and beautiful, even in the smallest details. With renewed determination, he started thinking beyond survival. He began to dream again, cautiously at first, and then with more confidence. He explored ideas for starting his own small business, something he had once believed impossible. She encouraged him to write down his plans, break them into manageable steps, and take action every day, no matter how small. Together, they worked on budgets, strategies, and research. Every achievement, no matter how minor, became a milestone in his journey from despair to hope. During this time, he also started to open up emotionally in ways he had never done before. He shared his fears, his regrets, and his dreams, not just with her, but gradually with others who had once been distant. He realized that building a life meant reconnecting, rebuilding bridges, and taking responsibility for his actions. And though the journey was challenging, her loyalty made it bearable. She was always there to remind him that setbacks did not erase progress, that mistakes were part of learning, that he was worthy of love and respect. Their connection deepened in subtle ways over time. He began to notice how her laughter could lift the heaviest of moods, how her quiet words of encouragement could calm his racing thoughts, and how her presence could make even mundane tasks feel meaningful. She had a way of turning ordinary moments into sources of strength and joy, and he found himself looking forward to their time together in ways he had never anticipated. One turning point came when he faced a particularly personal challenge. A close friend, who had once betrayed him, unexpectedly returned, seeking reconciliation. The encounter dredged up old wounds and insecurities. He felt uncertain, torn between resentment and the desire for closure. But she guided him patiently, reminding him that forgiveness was not about excusing the past, but about freeing himself from its hold. With her advice, he approached the situation cautiously, yet confidently, finding a sense of peace he had thought impossible. Her guidance had taught him that emotional resilience was as important as practical survival. As his life began to stabilize, he also started noticing the impact of their bond on himself in deeper, more profound ways. He became more empathetic, patient, and thoughtful in his interactions with others. He listened better, offered help more willingly, and approached challenges with a calm determination rather than panic. Her loyalty had modeled a kind of love and patience that he could now extend to the world. Beyond their small apartment, one quiet evening, after a long day of work and planning for the future, they sat together on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. He realized that his heart, once hardened by betrayal and loneliness, was now open again. He could feel hope, gratitude, and even a quiet sense of joy he had not known in years. And it was all because of her unwavering loyalty, her quiet encouragement, and her refusal to give up on him even when he had given up on himself. With her by his side, he started taking steps toward long-term goals he had once dismissed as impossible. He enrolled in classes to improve his skills, networked cautiously with others in his field, and began saving money for a future he could now imagine. Each small success, each incremental improvement, reinforced the lesson he had learned from her. Progress was not about dramatic leaps, but steady, persistent effort supported by those who cared. Despite the growing stability in his life, he never took her loyalty for granted. He made small gestures to show appreciation, preparing meals for her, leaving thoughtful notes, and occasionally surprising her with small gifts. He understood that her devotion had not been transactional. It had been given freely out of care and commitment, and he wanted her to know that her efforts were recognized, cherished, and reciprocated in the form of respect, kindness, and genuine affection. Over time, he began to notice that his feelings for her were shifting. What had started as gratitude and reliance was slowly transforming into something deeper. He found himself looking forward to her presence, thinking about her when she was not around, and valuing her opinions more than anyone else's. He realized that loyalty could spark love, not just in the heart of the person being supported, but in the heart of the one offering support as well. The realization was both exciting and frightening. He had never allowed himself to feel this kind of closeness with anyone before. Trust had been difficult enough. Love seemed almost impossible. But with her, it felt natural. Her patience, kindness, and unwavering presence had created a safe space for his heart to heal and open. He began to understand that love was not about grand gestures or instant connection, but about steady, consistent care over time. Life continued to challenge him, but he faced each day differently now. Fear no longer dominated his thoughts. Instead, hope, determination, and gratitude guided his actions. And through it all, she remained by his side. A constant reminder that loyalty and love could coexist, that they could heal wounds, and that they could transform even the most broken life into something meaningful and whole. And so, as he looked toward the future, he realized that his journey was no longer just about surviving or rebuilding. It was about embracing life fully, trusting again, and allowing himself to love and be loved. With her loyalty as his foundation, he had discovered the strength to face challenges, the courage to dream again, and the capacity to hope, not just for himself, but for both of them. Their bond had become the heart of his life, a testament to the power of patience, care, and unwavering devotion. Life had changed, but not overnight. It had been a long journey filled with struggles, small victories, and quiet lessons. The young man had come a long way from the broken, lonely figure he once was. He had faced failure, disappointment, and fear, but through it all one constant remained: her unwavering loyalty. The maid who had never abandoned him had become more than just a support. She had become the center of his life, the reason he had learned to believe in hope, trust, and love again. As the days passed, he found himself dreaming more boldly. Where once he had only imagined survival, now he envisioned building a life that mattered. With her guidance, he started planning for the future, carefully, step by step. He wanted stability, security, and most importantly, The chance to share happiness with someone who had given him so much without asking for anything in return. Her loyalty had taught him that relationships were built on trust, patience, and care, and he wanted to honor that in every way possible. He began dedicating himself fully to his work, taking on projects that challenged him, learning new skills, and finding innovative solutions to problems he had once avoided. There were setbacks, of course. Some days brought frustration, mistakes, or even the fear of failure returning to haunt him. But now he faced these moments differently. He had learned resilience, learned that failure was a teacher, not a sentence. And through it all, she was there, offering quiet encouragement, practical advice, or simply a presence that made him feel capable, grounded, and supported. Their bond had deepened in ways he had never anticipated. They shared small joys, like preparing meals together, laughing at trivial mistakes, or exchanging stories of past experiences. They celebrated achievements, no matter how minor, and comforted each other during moments of doubt. Through these simple acts, he realized that loyalty was not just about standing by someone in crisis. It was about sharing life in all its ordinary and extraordinary moments. One day, he received news that would test him in ways he had never faced before. An opportunity had arisen that could change his life dramatically. But it required courage, confidence, and complete dedication. For a moment, fear and doubt surged inside him, reminding him of all the times he had failed. But when he looked at her, he saw unwavering faith in his abilities, a quiet assurance that he could succeed if he dared to try. Her loyalty had become the anchor that allowed him to take risks he might otherwise have avoided. With her by his side, he stepped into the challenge, pouring his heart and energy into the work. Each task, each obstacle, became an opportunity to grow, to prove to himself that he was capable, and to honor the trust and support she had given him. There were difficult days when exhaustion and anxiety threatened to overwhelm him, but her encouragement never faltered. She reminded him that progress was built through persistence, that setbacks were temporary, and that he had already overcome so much to reach this point. As he succeeded, he noticed a transformation not only in his life, but within himself. He had become more patient, compassionate, and confident. He listened better, acted thoughtfully, and approached challenges with a calm, steady determination. He realized that the loyalty and care she had shown him had not only guided him through hardship, but had shaped him into a person capable of facing the world with courage and integrity. Gradually, he began to take steps toward building a life that was not just about survival, but about fulfillment. He saved money for the future, invested in his skills, and started forming relationships with people he had previously avoided. He sought out opportunities to help others, inspired by the kindness he had received. Through her influence, he discovered that giving back, showing care, and offering support could create a ripple effect that changed lives, just as hers had changed his. Over time, their relationship evolved into something deeper. It was no longer just about loyalty and support. It was about mutual respect, understanding, and love. He realized that his feelings for her had grown into a quiet, profound affection. Her constant care, patience, and kindness had nurtured not only his recovery, but also his capacity to connect emotionally and trust again. Love, he understood, could be quiet and steady, like the presence she had offered him through every challenge, every setback, and every triumph. He started to express his feelings in small ways, thoughtful gestures, gentle words, and moments of shared joy. She responded with warmth and understanding, never rushing, never forcing, but allowing their connection to grow naturally. Together, they built a life filled with mutual care, shared responsibilities, and small celebrations of everyday victories. Their home, once a place of loneliness and despair, had become a sanctuary of trust, laughter, and hope. The young man also began to reflect on how far he had come. He remembered the despair that had consumed him, the nights of isolation, and the weight of failure. He thought of the moments when he had felt invisible, unworthy, and hopeless. And he realized that it was her loyalty that had allowed him to rise above those dark times, to rediscover his strength and to embrace life fully once again. She had shown him that human connection, patience, and unwavering care could heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend. Their bond became the foundation for all that he built thereafter. He continued to pursue his ambitions, tackle challenges, and face the uncertainties of life with determination. But he did so with a sense of security and confidence he had never known before. Her support reminded him that success was sweeter when shared, that victories were more meaningful when celebrated together, and that life's challenges were easier to face when one had someone who truly cared. Eventually, he reached a point where he could look back without regret. The journey had been long, painful, and filled with obstacles, but it had also been transformative. He had learned resilience, empathy, patience, and the importance of genuine human connection. And through it all, she had been there, not as someone seeking reward, but as someone whose loyalty and care had made him whole again. He realized that his life had been broken. Not just materially, but emotionally. He had been lonely, afraid, and hopeless. Yet through her support, he had discovered a new path, one that led to love, trust, and the possibility of a brighter future. Her loyalty had been the bridge between despair and hope, between isolation and connection, between a broken past and a life filled with meaning. In the final months of their journey together, they began to dream collectively. They planned for the future, shared responsibilities, and supported each other in personal and professional growth. Their connection was no longer defined solely by need or circumstance. It was defined by mutual respect, affection, and shared goals. They celebrated achievements, comforted each other in setbacks, and nurtured the bond that had grown steadily over time. Looking back, he understood that life's true value was not measured by wealth, success, or recognition, but by the depth of connection and loyalty one experienced. She had taught him that love was patient, enduring, and transformative. Her unwavering presence had reshaped his life, showing him that even the most broken heart could learn to love again, and even the most fragile spirit could regain strength. By the time their story reached its present, he had become a man who could face the world with confidence, hope, and courage. He had rebuilt his life step by step, learned to trust again, and opened his heart to love. And at the center of it all was her, the loyal maid who had refused to abandon him, who had nurtured his growth, and who had shown him the power of patience, care, and unwavering devotion. Their story stood as a testament to the extraordinary impact of loyalty and love. It showed that even in the darkest times, a single person's steadfast support could restore hope, rebuild confidence, and heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend. The young man had transformed from someone broken and poor into someone capable of giving and receiving love, all thanks to the quiet, unwavering presence of the woman who had believed in him when the world had not. And so, as they moved forward together, side by side, he embraced life fully. No longer defined by past failures or loneliness, the journey had been long, and it had not been easy. But it had led to something far more valuable. A life rebuilt, a heart restored, and a love born from loyalty, patience, and unwavering care. They had both grown through the trials, and together, they had found a future filled with hope, trust, and the promise of enduring happiness.